It's afternoon. I did rise and shine this morning. I got my photos with the sunrise but I was really feeling called to do things a little bit differently today because I have gotten a little bit out of whack. I'm going to stand this way so you guys can see this beautiful lake. I got lucky and I had the dock to myself for a few minutes. So I got a little bit off track myself these past couple of weeks. And sometimes you don't know when you're in it, even when you're spending time with God and really trying. It's easy as a human to get things a little out of whack because our body and the signals that our brain and our body are telling us and picking up on moods and energy of other people, and especially when it's people we care about, we can get muddled up real quickly. And I read a lot of Ezekiel this morning, a lot, like chapters 20 through, I want to say 30, like a lot. It was a lot. And it's a lot that is in this really interesting book of visions and messages and metaphor and analogy and stories of downfalls of society. It was just like one thing after another, and analogies of even comparing Israel and Edom, was it, to prostitutes. Like, whoa, like some heavy hitting stuff. And then to try to pull that all together. And what was really speaking to my spirit was this, of course, it all has to do with their relationship of God. We get that message very quickly, and that they are living in the flesh and according to their own brains and their own physical needs, and finding their self-worth. You know, it's all, I titled today, Your Healthy Sense of Self-Worth. In my particular journey, because I kind of default to being a people pleaser, and with being a people pleaser, we often find ourselves, our value of self in how other people see us, and how their moods are, and how we gauge our sense of peace, happiness, all those things depend on others around us. Codependent. We're codependent. And I've almost titled that today because I thought, well, could you be in codependent relationships with money, with power, with acquisition, with prestige, like all those things, greed? Yes and no. I don't think that's the way we really understand the word of codependency, but all of that comes back to our sense of self. And when we have a healthy sense of self, and we remember that we are a created being in relationship with our Creator, and even relating to other people from this healthy sense of self, like we value ourselves, we have a high self-worth, but it's not all about us. It's not from a prideful or selfish place, but it's from a very honoring place. Like, I deserve, and maybe deserve's not even the right word, but I expect to treat myself well and be treated well. And also I'm going to extend that to other people because they are also created beings, even if they're not acting like they deserve it or they understand their own self-worth. But because I understand who we're all created by, and that from the fact of our Creator, living things are due a certain amount of respect and honor. But it's not about them, it's not about me, it's about the Creator. And when we have things in the right order and the right alignment, the outflow of how we treat ourselves and others comes a lot more naturally. And when we get out of whack, and when the ego gets back in the driver's seat, we get into trouble. And then, at least in Old Testament days, prophets would compare nations and people to prostitutes, and the greedy leaders that they're finding they don't have a healthy sense of self, so they're striving to acquire, have power, have money, to demonstrate, I'm worthy, I am this, I am that, and also to earn it and step on a pedestal of feeling deserving. Look what I've done. It's all about me, me, me. Look what I've done. And when we get out of whack, and sometimes we don't even see it. So my particular way of getting out of alignment may be different than yours, and may be different than this person over here and there. Like, we all have our different kind of tendencies and pitfalls with how we get unhealthy in our relationship with ourselves and with God. Hey, I didn't know who would tune in this afternoon, since I'm coming at a little bit different time, because I had to get myself realigned and spend some extra time, not only in nature today, but in church, and just reflecting on this wild book of Ezekiel. And I think that is a lot metaphorically of what Ezekiel is talking about in his own ways of receiving visions and all these analogies and comparisons from God, is that when we don't have that healthy sense of self, not because of ourself and in and of ourself, but because of whose we are. We hear that a lot in Christianese. I know who I am because of whose I am. And that's a whole different thing. And that's not love of self for the self. And then we can't get caught in too much self-importance. But there is this healthy sense of, I am important because somebody thought enough of me. I am here. I am created. I can be a vehicle of his love. But I also have to love myself in the same way. I can't give love to other people if I'm self-hating, if I'm not honoring myself, if I'm not taking care of myself. But we've got to do it in a really balanced way. I don't always like using that word, but I think it's a good word in this application. Like, it's got to be, because if it's too much, then it does. We easily can fool ourselves that it is all about us, and oh, look at me, and look at what I'm doing, and we can get off track really easily. So and I think this is why, at least for me, but it does say it in the Bible, and lots of other philosophies say similar things, and other realms of thought, spiritual thought, that centering yourself and getting connected with the spirit, universal intelligence, whatever you call it. To me, it's God and Jesus, and getting back in that proper alignment, staying attuned. And that's why it's a daily process, and they compare it to eating and drinking, because gosh, talk to me 2 hours from now, or even my husband or my kids, and let them, oh, she was good there for a couple of hours, and then she bit my head off, or she looked at me sideways. It's hard. It is hard to suppress the ego and have a healthy sense of self. So we've got to really be disciplined about some of our self-care and things that we're doing to keep ourselves in this right alignment, so that we can really serve others from a true place of servanthood and love, and do all of those good fruits of the Spirit that are talked about from a place of authenticity, not a place of like keeping the law, or doing it, look how good I am, for the self-image. You got to always check your motives. your motives, when you catch your motives getting off track and your ego and anger and frustration are in the driver's seat a lot, and a lot of judgment and getting frustrated with other people, that's really not about other people. That's about you. And that's not always easy to see, because we can feel very self-righteous in our attitude towards other people. And we can see, and we're keeping an internal record of like, well, look at all I'm doing. I'm doing so, and I'm trying so hard, and I'm doing so good. And we want the grace from other people, but on the same token, we're standing on our little pedestals with judgment and like, well, you deserve my anger right now because you're being whatever is in your mind about that person. And they are human too, in their own struggle with their own will and ego, whether they're aware of it or not. Once you become self-aware and what's going on, you're the one that has the more responsibility. But we can't get too caught up in it and too perfectionistic about it, which is why we have a source that's perfect to come back to and fill up and get realigned and readjusted. And we can only do the best we can with what we have. And self-awareness and humility are one of those best tools, because then we're submitting and going, oh yeah, it's not about me. It's not about me. But it is about me in the sense that I am an important vehicle and representative, and I've got to be walking the walk the best I can. So I think that is a lot of what Ezekiel is talking about underneath all of the threats of destruction, because the coming destruction with all these various cities. And we even just think of, well, it's even if we drill it down to each city and land representing different types of people, which he actually does in his own visions. And he gives us that example of how to sort of read a lot of his own book, I guess, is that we all got our own struggles and our own ways that we get off track. In a lot of ways, there's a lot of Proverbs that shows up in Ezekiel, at least how I'm reading it. But a lot of warnings and a lot of the ways that we get off track. And it's all about our how we see ourselves, how we really value ourselves. Are we valuing ourselves because we understand that we are a created being by a creator, a loving creator, created in his image and then reflecting that image? Or are we living down here in the murky waters of humanness, trying to live according to, well, I'm only a good person if I have wealth, or if I have titles, wealth and titles, if people view me a certain way, if I'm doing all of these things and I'm getting my sense of self from something in the human world versus coming to the human world with a healthy sense of self and then living from that place. And that is when we start to get the fruits of the Spirit and things feel right, because we know, oh, I'm doing this, I'm allowing the Spirit to flow through me. I'm more of an open vessel. And it's hard to stay open. That's what I'm working on today. So anyway, have a great Sunday. It is going to be a hot one here in the state of Kentucky, where I am currently. And we're going to finish up the book of Ezekiel tomorrow. And think about your healthy sense of self, maybe the way I have today, and use Ezekiel's warnings to the various countries that have gotten off track and people, and why they're getting off track, and see, and if things aren't quite right in your world, you need to look in the mirror, because that's the only thing we ultimately have control over, and our perspective and how we're showing up in relationship to with our loved ones, with our community, with our jobs. And if those are our source of our healthy, well, let me put it this way. Let's back up a minute. If those things are, you are dependent on those and the performance of those for your sense of self, that is not healthy. That is not healthy, because we're all a mess. And if we're depending on each other and things that are temporary in this world for our sense of self, we're going to always feel out of control, off track, trouble in relationships. We've got to stay in tune with the eternal, with the divine, with the higher, the non-human part of ourselves and our spirit, for a healthy sense of self. And then we can show up appropriately with the right amount of self-respect, honoring ourselves, loving other people while still holding strong boundaries. I think that's probably where we're going to really land tomorrow, is on healthy boundaries, and getting clarity on those, and having a sense of clarity and revisiting and taking inventory on those regularly to stay in the healthy sense of self. All right. Have a great day and go rise and shine. Bye.